It seems like NASA and China are each planning to send humans to Mars. Both space agencies have tentative plans to launch the first crewed missions by 2033, right when Mars and Earth are playing a game of tag. And that's not all. Other missions may happen in 2035, 2037, and beyond. The ultimate goal is to build a Mars habitat for future exploration and research. So, how are they going to do that? Well, let's find out. Now, traveling to Mars isn't as easy as hopping on a rocket. The distance between our planets can change a lot over time, ranging from around 35 million miles to 250 million miles. And even with our best technology, it takes 6 to 9 months just to get to the red planet. So, a round trip to Mars could mean spending 3 years away from Earth, dealing with extra radiation and floating around in microgravity. But NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has some exciting news. Scientists have been working tirelessly to design a minimal architecture mission to Mars. They're thinking that 2033 is the perfect year to make it happen. So here's the deal. Every 15 years, the rocky planets, Venus, Mars, and Earth, align just right to create a cosmic sweet spot. The mission will make the most of this rare alignment and perform an epic gravity assist maneuver using Venus. It's like getting a boost from a planetary slingshot. We'll speed up our spacecraft and reduce the need for making our own propulsion. The report also talked about some really cool ideas, like using nuclear power for spacecraft engines and using Martian resources to make things. These technologies could make space travel faster, protect astronauts from radiation, and make it easier to live in space. They might even let us make resources and fuel right on Mars. So, this is how the plan goes down. First, we'll launch a spacecraft towards Mars. It'll spend around 30 days in high orbit, exploring and gathering valuable data. Then, it's going to head back to Earth, also swinging by Venus for a quick visit. So this whole adventure will last approximately 570 days, which is just 1.6 years. And a shorter adventure means less exposure to radiation. Now keep in mind, this mission will focus on orbiting Mars rather than landing on its surface. It's just a stepping stone, paving the way for future landing missions. Just like Apollo 8 mission orbited the Moon before Apollo 11's historic landing. Landing on Mars by 2033 might be a bit too ambitious due to funding constraints, but who knows? If all goes smoothly, it could become a reality. Now for the coolest part. We don't need fancy new technologies or vehicles for all this. We'll make use of existing ones that are already in production or being studied for the Artemis Moon program. Now let's break down our Mars mission vehicle. A big puzzle of many parts. And guess what? It was put together by a community of space enthusiasts back in 2017. That's right, it wasn't the scientists who produced it first. But now, this isn't just some fantastic idea anymore. Most of these things are already becoming a reality, being made or planned by NASA. So let's take a look at this concept. First, we have the Orion spacecraft. This is the spaceship that will take the crew to the orbit around Earth and bring them safely back home. It's like a super fancy space taxi, and it might be the most powerful taxi to ever exist. It's combined with 3 powerful propulsion stages, and we're also using a special fuel that doesn't need to be ultra cold like in the movies. Next, there's the Earth departure stage. This is an important part of the mission. It helps us make a powerful thrust that sends us on our way to Mars. Then we have Mars Transit Habitat. This is where the crew will live and hang out during their journey to Mars. Like a cozy space house with all the things they need to be comfortable. And finally, the Mars Orbit Insertion Stage. When we reach Mars, this awesome thing will help us slow down and enter its orbit smoothly. It's our maneuvering expert. Even the Mars Transit Habitat is being developed and might even be tested in a few years. That means we're on track to have the whole thing ready for our amazing Mars mission by 2033. In other words, it's all about working with what we've got and making it happen. Now, let's talk about the plan's timeline. Mid-2028, the action begins. First, we'll need to do a couple of test flights. We'll send 2 stages ahead of time to make sure we can come back to Earth safely. These stages will join together like 2 spaceships becoming best buddies. They'll orbit the red planet and then come home. To do all that, we'll use powerful rockets and 13 commercial launches. It's going to be a huge space party. Late 2032. After all that, we launched the fully assembled Mars mission vehicle to high Earth orbit. So far, this is an empty vehicle that awaits astronauts. If all is good, then it'll be ready for the final check. March 2033. Time for our brave crew and their Orion spacecraft to join the party. We launch them and they dock with the Mars mission vehicle in Earth's orbit. They'll make sure the whole lot is just right before we head to Mars. Flexibility is important, so we can adjust our plans if needed. April 2033. Everyone's ready for the adventure. We perform a powerful burn, like a big push that sends us on our way to Mars. The crew will travel for about 200 days. November 2033. Finally, the crew reaches the red planet. Once they're in Mars orbit, they'll spend about 30 days exploring and doing awesome space stuff. Mars will be our playground. When it's time to return home, they'll say goodbye to the stage that helped them get into Mars orbit. Then their vehicle will meet up with the 2 stages we sent ahead. Remember these space buddies? And after that, it will take us about 340 days for the crew to come back to Earth. This is where we'll use the gravity of Venus to slingshot around the Sun. To keep the equipment and crew at the right temperature, we'll have a sunshade that will protect us from the Sun's heat since we'll be really close to it. In the end, Orion will re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down in the water. What a heroic ending! And this would be just the beginning. Our awesome team has another plan for the bravest adventurers out there. It's called the Conjunction-class long-stay mission. It launches in April 2033 and lasts a long time, 950 days. That's more than 2.5 years, with 550 days spent in Mars orbit. It requires fewer launches from Earth, but has some different challenges, like spending more time in microgravity and dealing with increased radiation. So we'll need some real space heroes for this one. But of course, there are some major hurdles to overcome before we can make all this happen. Experts closely looked at NASA's Journey to Mars program and found that the plan needs some serious changes. There are a few high-risk areas, like life support systems for long missions, using solar power for propulsion, making oxygen on Mars, and so on. They're also worried about timelines, funding, and many other things. So, according to them, sticking to a deadline of 2033 might be impossible with the current plans and budgets. Even aiming for 2035 carries significant risks and possible delays. But hey, space exploration has never been easy, right? With realistic determination, anything is possible. Most likely, the idea of sending people to Mars will be realized before 2040. NASA is working on finishing the plan and details to make this possible. So, even though we still have some tough nuts to crack before we can make it a reality, the dream of sending humans to Mars is exciting. It's a thrilling adventure full of challenges, discoveries, and the spirit of human exploration. So, let's show the universe what we're made of. And that would be mostly carbon. Imagine something terrible happening to Earth and humans having to leave it as fast as possible. And you have to decide which planet will become your new home. Which one will you pick? Probably the first planet that comes to mind is Mars. It's relatively close. Like Earth, it's also a rocky planet. It even has an atmosphere, even though it's much thinner than what we have on our planet. But at the same time, the North Pole on Earth would seem balmy to you in comparison to Mars. On the red planet, the average temperature is minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. The most radioactive areas on our home planet might seem harmless if you compare them with the surface of Mars. But what if we terraform Mars? Could we keep transforming the red planet until it becomes capable of supporting human life? It would be an enormous feat. Mars is an extremely dangerous place. Should you teleport there right now without any protective suit or anything, the gas in your blood would instantly turn into bubbles. You can probably imagine the consequences. Add oxygen deprivation, cold exposure, and radiation poisoning to the equation and, well, who's next? If we still decided to terraform Mars, we would need to create a stronger magnetosphere. We've got this protective magnetic layer on Earth. It shields us from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. The red planet would also need a thicker atmosphere, again for protecting us from harmful space stuff better. Right now, the Martian atmosphere is almost entirely composed of carbon dioxide with tiny amounts of oxygen. For us to live there comfortably, Mars would also need to be warmer. And if we managed to somehow warm the planet up, we'd also be able to release frozen carbon dioxide. At the moment, there are vast reserves of this gas at the red planet's polar caps and other areas. It would help the atmosphere to become thicker, making it possible for water to exist on the surface of the planet. Right now, there is some water on Mars. The atmosphere of the red planet is too thin for this water to stay in its liquid form. But under the surface of the planet, it's a different matter. You can find water under the surface of the planet in its polar regions. The only place where this water is visible is at the North Polar Ice Cap. Also, sometimes salty water flows down crater walls and hillsides, and there are tiny quantities of water in the planet's atmosphere, but it only exists as vapor. If liquid water existed on the surface of the planet, it would make it easier for us to start growing plants, and plants, in turn, would begin to produce oxygen. But first of all, we would need to start the warming process. How? Well, Elon Musk suggests using nuclear energy to make Mars more livable. He says it could be done by creating a continuous flow of low-fallout nuclear fusion explosions above the atmosphere of the planet. It could create something like numerous artificial suns. It could warm the planet, melting the frozen ice caps, which would then thicken the atmosphere, causing even more warming. Other strategies for Martian global warming include the diversion of asteroids into the poles of the planet, or the large-scale production of greenhouse gases that could help us heat the red planet. Or we could create a giant space mirror, as huge as the side of Mars. It would reflect tons of additional sunlight onto the planet. The problem is all these projects would have exorbitant costs. They would also require serious upgrades in our technological capabilities. Could there be an easier and cheaper way of terraforming the red planet? It seems so. Casey Hanmer used to work in NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Now he's the founder of a startup hoping to create carbon-negative natural gas by pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere of our planet. He's also made a proposal to terraform Mars for a modest $10 billion. Sounds alluring. So, what is his idea? Mass-produce small solar sails. These are already existing technologies, even though they appeared only recently. Such sails use sunlight to propel themselves, like ships use the wind to sail. These solar sails could be launched into low Earth orbit, and after that, they would fly themselves to Mars. There, they would reflect sunlight onto the night side of the planet. According to Hanmer's calculations, a decade of such launches could result in a 1% increase in temperature on Mars. Hanmer also believes that we could mass-produce solar cells at cell phone factories, all because a solar sail would need a processor, a camera for navigation, and some electronics to be able to transmit data, just like a smartphone. In other words, solar sails would be like small satellites using cell phone technology. Each of these sails would also need a sail of its own, a thin space blanket weighing about 2 pounds. When unfurled, it would span around the size of 2 basketball courts. Would this plan involving solar sails enable people to terraform Mars? Hanmer doesn't think so. Even if we put loads of money into solar sails, they would only make the red planet warmer and more humid, but they still wouldn't be enough to make Mars suitable for human life. Most scientists are also very skeptical about the very idea of terraforming this cold, dry world. They say that carbon dioxide and water vapor are the only greenhouse gases present on Mars, but there's just not enough of them to change the situation. Let's say we manage to melt the polar ice caps with the help of Elon Musk's nuclear technology or solar sails. And still, this ice will only release enough carbon dioxide to bring the atmospheric pressure to 1.2% of what it is on Earth. Plus, most of the carbon dioxide gas wouldn't be accessible, and we wouldn't be able to mobilize it. Even if we decided to go through an energy-intensive process of the extraction of carbon dioxide from the planet's soil, dust, and minerals, we'd still only get the atmosphere to a mere 5% of where it needs to be. Water is another problem. It is salty on Mars. It might even be as salty as the oceans on our planet. But these salts aren't what you find on Earth. If a person consumed a certain amount of them, they would be highly toxic to the human body. Who's next? On our planet, these salts are formed as byproducts of rocket fuel, as well as in road flares and fireworks. Naturally, they only occur in very dry areas. If there are no particular bacteria to break them down, these substances accumulate year after year, and their concentration in water is constantly increasing. But in theory, it's possible to purify even such water. The process of filtration could help the astronauts get rid of 90% of harmful substances. Then they could use a UV disinfection unit. This would also help get rid of any foreign molecules, if there are any, that might be hiding in the water. This stage would not only protect the astronauts, but also prevent them from bringing any dormant Martian microbes back to Earth. In other words, future travelers to Mars shouldn't have too many problems with drinking water on the red planet, but only if they bring the right purification equipment that can deal with any water quality. Because however bad running out of water in the middle of a desert is, experiencing it on another planet sounds much more terrifying. Anyway, back to terraforming the red planet. Once you start thinking about it, some worrying questions arise. Who is supposed to decide whether we should start this process? When should we start it? What if there's some form of life on the red planet, like indigenous microbes we haven't spotted yet, and our attempts to change their home will disturb them? What if they don't survive these changes? Now, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments.
So we have to consider the logistics. Another thing to look out for is caves in the ground that are not necessarily stuck on mountains. Scientists believe that most potential places for humans to thrive are caves. These spaces are large enough to host large populations. So far, they identified 9 caves as large as football fields. So what would life look like if we lived in caves on Mars? For one thing, sunlight would be hard to access. By the time we reach Mars, we would have the best technology to maximize our lifespan in a hostile environment, which means withstanding the harsh sun rays of Mars. Most likely, we would dig through the caves further underground where oxygen would be pumped for everyone to breathe. People can walk around casually, thinking they're on Earth, and to exit the caves, you would need to wear a special suit. These cave colonies would have dormitories for people to live in and special spaces for colony meetings, entertainment, grocery markets, schools, and other places that are needed to sustain a colony. There would also be indoor farms to grow crops and raise livestock. A team of experts mapped out what some of the dwellings will look like on Mars. And just like on Earth, we will have apartments for young professionals, family homes, and luxury mansions. Some of the dwelling units would be placed on the surface and not in caves. One of the key elements of the design and architecture is how to build it around the natural light to brighten up the homes. Another element is how to deflect radiation and cosmic rays. Because Mars has such a thin atmosphere, sun rays and other hazardous objects easily enter Mars. The dwelling units also have to be sturdy to protect them from severe dust storms and extreme cold temperatures. Some of the living pods or dwelling units that are for couples or singles would have tunnels leading to a shared workspace and garden. Studies show that even being in the presence of greenery can reduce stress levels significantly. And on the red planet, we would definitely need some greenery. We can expect the family homes to be built within the caves, not necessarily underground. It would be tempting to head outside with the view of Mars, but the large thick glass would prevent anything from coming in and out. Those who are underground with a view rely on LEDs and camera systems to screen the surface landscape of Mars so it acts like real windows. And if you're bored of the surface, you can always switch the channel and watch something else as you please. Maybe a flowing river surrounded by trees. Or maybe a penthouse view of all of New York. The choice is yours. There would be a driveway that leads to a garage so one can enter and exit easily. There won't really be a reason to exit the cave colony except probably to visit other cave colonies. In this case, we would have highly crafted vehicles that will take people from colony to colony on the surface. The vehicles can withstand harsh temperatures and would be constantly transporting people daily. Some people might live in a certain colony and have to commute to work every day in other colonies. Humans might not have to be working in dangerous conditions or on the surface. We would have robots that will do that for us. The thing about robots is that they don't need to be human-shaped to do a job. However, before transporting humans to space, we would need to create some human-like robots and land them on Mars. With the exact physical form, we can determine what would happen to people if they were on Mars. We would have robots for specific tasks, helping us with everything. Let's not forget artificial intelligence plays a major role in monitoring the systems and updating the functionalities of the colony. It'll know when certain systems it needs. Then come the other people who wish to start their life on Mars. People would need entertainment, so musicians would find a place in the colony. We can't expect everyone to go out on a nice sunny day to the beach, but perhaps one day, when the colony is large enough, there can be an artificial body of water with the same elements as the beach. Livestock animals would also be shipped from Earth to be raised on Mars, where they can populate for our nourishment. We can also bring most of the animals and establish a wildlife sanctuary for everyone to enjoy and for the animals to thrive. For now, humans are planning on reaching the Red Planet sooner than we think, and who knows, maybe you can be one of the first people to sign up and have your own little dwelling unit far away from Earth.
Hundreds of spaceships take off from Earth's surface and head toward Mars. Fast forward 7 months, and this space fleet of ships is near the Red Planet. Soon they will all land, and a few thousand people will become citizens of Mars. Perhaps they will never return to their home planet, because there will be absolutely all conditions for a comfortable life here. It takes time and many expeditions to create a self-sustaining colony on Mars. Here is how, step by step, people might build a full-fledged city there, with factories, hospitals, apartment buildings, and even clubs and restaurants. First, we need to pick a time to launch the rocket. A launch window opens once every 780 days. That's when the distance between Earth and Mars is the shortest. In this case, the journey will take about 6 to 7 months. Let's move to the launch pad. Here, we see the spacecraft connected to a booster rocket. Ignition! The booster sends the spacecraft into the air. It then undocks and lands back on Earth. At the same time, the spacecraft's engines start and it makes its way to Earth's parking orbit. To make this ascent, the ship has used almost all its fuel and now needs refueling. To do this, we use our booster again. A huge crane places another spacecraft on the booster. There are huge fuel tanks inside the ship. The booster launches from Earth and takes the refueler into orbit. It docks with the spaceship and fills it with fuel. The journey through space may need a total of 5 such refuelings. And for the first mission to build a colony on Mars, we need 5 spaceships. So that's about 25 launches from Earth. Considering that the booster costs $230 million, the refueler $130 million, and the ship itself is $200 million, the price tag on the mission is pretty impressive. So, ignition. Fast forward in time, and the first 5 ships descend to the surface of Mars. These ships haven't brought the first humans. They carry only payloads, like fuel and water supplies, oxygen for breathing, and medical supplies. There are also first living modules, waste management systems, and a huge number of solar panels for generating electricity. Before landing, one of the ships launches a system of satellites into orbit. It'll provide communication on the Red Planet. So, the robots begin their work on Mars. First, a whole bunch of little rovers line up and unfold solar panels. Their total area reaches the size of 7 soccer fields. They're much less efficient on Mars than on Earth. Frequent sandstorms fill the working surface of the panels with sand. But at the same time, the strong winds of the Red Planet also help to wipe the sand away. Other rovers, equipped with powerful drills, begin searching for water in the Martian soil. When they find water, people will begin producing fuel. We'll combine carbon dioxide from the atmosphere with the mined water at a high temperature and under high pressure. It'll result in getting methane for rockets and oxygen for breathing. Since February 2021, Mars Perseverance rover has been testing the technology for oxygen extraction. It has a box inside. This is the Mars Oxygen IRSU experiment, also called MOXIE. This thing pulls Martian air inside and then, under high pressure, takes 1 atom of oxygen from carbon dioxide. Such a thing, about the size of a shoebox, can provide enough oxygen for 1 astronaut to breathe. But if you build the same mechanism, but the size of a large factory, it'll produce oxygen for an entire colony and release the rest into the atmosphere of Mars. Another group of rovers is working to turn the surface of Mars into a landing zone to prepare for the next step in colonizing the Red Planet. By this time, the robotic population of Mars has been working on these tasks for 2 years and 2 months, and people on Earth have been waiting for a new flight window to open. This time, not 5, but 12 spaceships are coming to Mars. 10 of them are cargo ships, which bring construction materials, fuel, and other supplies, as well as a lot of scientific equipment and 3D printers. 2 other ships carry the first interplanetary astronauts. The doors of the spaceships open, and 30 heroes set foot on the surface of Mars for the first time in history. These people are scientists, engineers, and doctors. They have undergone a strict selection and long training to become the first people to conquer another planet. And these guys don't have a return ticket. They'll have to stay on Mars for 2 years. The astronauts live right in their spaceships and try to get used to the unusual conditions on Mars. The temperature here is about minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Also, the gravity on Mars is 2.5 times weaker than on our home planet. That means a person here can jump twice as high and lift heavier objects. But the muscles in human bodies have a hard time getting used to such a difference, so astronauts can't work full-time. The first thing they do is unload cargo ships and deploy life support systems. Some people are experimenting with turning Martian soil into material for 3D printers. Others are setting up greenhouses and cultivating soil to grow plants. The human waste recycling system the robots brought here is used to make fertilizer for plants. 2 more years and 2 months have passed. We see a launch of a spaceship, not from Earth, but from Mars. The 30 astronauts have completed their mission and are on their way home. It's easier for spaceships to take off from Mars because the gravitational force here is less powerful. At the same time, ships are launched from Earth. They'll bring nearly 100 new inhabitants and even more cargo to Mars. When this space fleet arrives at the red planet, the astronauts can taste the first food grown here. 3D printers begin building homes on Mars. They print outer shells from Martian soil and plant waste. These shells will protect the dwellings from solar radiation and strong winds. And inside the shells, people will build permanent houses. They're inflatable and are equipped with modules brought directly from the spaceships. These houses have living bays, research bays, and communication centers. The construction goes on for 2 more years until the next flight window opens again. Some astronauts leave Mars, but more and more people come here with every new mission. They no longer live in spaceships. There are comfortable underground houses and 3D printed shelters. Most of the food is already produced on Mars. A new generation of robots works together with farmers. Other robots help to build even more houses to accommodate the ever-increasing human population. 2 more years have passed. Various space agencies launch their missions to Mars. There are more people, more scientific equipment, and even tanks with fish. In 2035, Mars and Earth are at a record short distance, so people send a huge fleet of ships with astronauts and construction materials. By this time, the human colony looks like a small city with many interconnected domes. Its inhabitants have already begun building an underground network of tunnels to move between houses, laboratories, and factories. They've also built the first hospital. 2 years later, the population of Mars reaches the 1,500 mark. Almost all of these people will become permanent residents of the planet. 4 years and 2 more launch windows later, the first restaurant opens its doors. Also, the construction of a nuclear power plant begins. Once it's finished, the Martians will no longer need constant supplies from Earth. From above, the colony looks like a small town. There's a farming section where food is grown, a living section, and a factory district. And with each new mission, people bring more and more solar panels. Now their total area equals dozens of soccer fields. All this allows the astronauts to feel at home. They also don't have to wait for food supplies from Earth. 20 years of the human colony on Mars. Its population is now about 30,000 people. Workers begin to bring their families to Mars. The first schools are built here. 30 years. The population is already over 100,000 people. The colony's infrastructure allows it to be completely self-sufficient. People produce enough food, get enough fuel and oxygen. Around this time, the first plants start growing in Martian soil. There's more and more oxygen in the planet's atmosphere. The trees planted in greenhouses contributed to this. The greenhouse effect from all the human activity helps warm up the surface of Mars, if only a bit. People still have to wear spacesuits when they go outside. It will take many more years until people will be able to breathe on Mars like they do on Earth. Gradually, rivers and lakes will appear. Green plants will cover most of the land. And then the inhabitants of Mars will be able to go outside without an oxygen helmet and call the red planet, now green, their home.
How about a mysterious object that used to orbit between Mars and Jupiter? At one point in the early days of the solar system, it was destroyed by some catastrophic event. This space body is called Feton, and this planet is totally hypothetical. But some people believe that the debris the planet left behind could have formed the asteroid belt. If you like this kind of content, please give it a non-hypothetical like and subscribe. Your support is very important to us. Thank you. Now, at the start of the 19th century, people hadn't discovered the asteroid belt yet. But in 1801, one astronomer spotted the largest asteroid in our solar system, Ceres. At that time, it was believed that a planet was orbiting between Mars and Jupiter, and Ceres seemed to be a suitable candidate. But the next year, another astronomer discovered one more space object with a similar orbit. It was an asteroid that was later named Pallas. These discoveries made scientists conclude that these two objects could have been fragments of the very planet that had once been dwelling between Mars and Jupiter. The following discovery of two more asteroids, Juno and Vesta, seemed to confirm this idea. Only in the 20th century did the hypothetical planet get its name, Feton. It was actually a name taken from Greek mythology, meaning shining one. The hero with this name was the son of the sun deity, Helios, who rode his solar chariot across the sky every day, giving humans the heat and light necessary for survival. One day, Helios allowed Feton to drive his chariot. But the sun didn't manage to control the horses. Everything went wrong, and Earth was about to burn down. That's why the main deity, Zeus, had to stop Feton with a thunderbolt. The idea of the asteroid belt being the sad result of the planet's destruction was called the disruption theory. And of course, there were several ideas explaining the planet's tragic fate. The most obvious one is that Feton was hit by a large space object. It could be another hypothetical body called Nemesis. Some people believe that it's our sun's companion star. According to this theory, the sun has a small companion star that has an extremely elliptical orbit. This orbit periodically brings it close to the Oort cloud, a large sphere of icy objects surrounding the sun. This, in turn, causes a lot of mess. It might be the reason why this hypothetical companion star was also nicknamed the Death Star. It might be a red or brown dwarf. But whatever it is at the furthest point of its orbit, it's believed to be about 1.5 light-years away. The search for this star has been in progress for decades, but no one has succeeded in locating this elusive and potentially non-existent space object. Anyway, back to Feton. Another theory claims that the planet could have suffered some internal cataclysm which tore it apart. But these days, the disruption theory has fallen out of favor. It was replaced by the accretion theory. According to it, the asteroid belt formed in the process of gradual buildup of particles initially floating in a gaseous environment. With time, they came together to create larger masses. Gravity pulled on these particles, encouraging them to stay together and form planetesimals, tiny planet-like bodies that later form real planets. Planetesimals kept colliding with one another, eventually developing into protoplanets. Such protoplanets grow until they form planetary bodies. As the mass of objects increases, the gravitational forces acting between particles become stronger too, continuing to build gas, dust, and ice within the nebular disk. It all has a snowball effect where the increase in mass results in more particles getting involved in the process. Eventually, there's no building material left, and large space objects float in the darkness of space. Now, many experts think that the asteroid belt is the remains of the protoplanetary disk which had once been orbiting the sun before the planets formed. Unfortunately, it never had a chance to coalesce into a planet because Jupiter's gravitational effect prevented it from happening. In any case, even though Feton's was a good story, it's not popular anymore.